Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balcerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. I have an amazing guest today. She has over 15 years of experience in data and cybersecurity. Just joined an amazing group as a principal consultant on the data risk management team at Trace3. Jennifer Fite, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for our conversation today.
Same, I've been looking forward to this since we met a few weeks ago. You ready to jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
In your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge organizations are facing with regard to data security?
Obviously, my heart wants to say AI, but I think that what we've seen this year has kind of shifted slightly. Like AI is always going to be a risk. But I've seen so much supply chain issues, so many supply chain issues and supply chain breaches that are putting data at risk as well, that I think that's kind of surfaced to become a new threat. I guess what I've seen and kind of following the trail is you went from like on-prem technology where you can wrap your arms around your infrastructure and you can see it all. Now we're heavily cloud dependent, and within cloud, everybody wants to have integrations into your systems, and then there's nth party degree of integrations into those systems integrations, which creates like this very robust supply chain, and your security is only as strong as the weakest link in your supply chain. And we saw three significant breaches. I think Salesforce had a bad run for this year, GitHub, and then there was like a couple other, but the supply chain attacks have increased by like 30% this year. There used to be like a couple to now there's a ton. And they're getting to the data that people are storing. They can move laterally, or they're stealing like trusted permissions, OAuth tokens. So then you go from looking like a known bad actor to now you're a known actor. And that, I think, is very scary.
Totally agree. It's been an interesting year, and I feel like we've always had kind of third-party risk management within enterprises. I don't know. I've personally never sat in those roles, but I don't know that folks really thought to those nth degrees, like you referred to. I think it was always, what's that first hop? Maybe the second hop, right? What's the supplier of my suppliers, but not necessarily going much further. So, how do you propose folks try to solve for that? What's your take?
Honestly, and this is maybe a contrary statement, but if we are really, really good at doing the right thing with our data internally, then regardless of the holes that we're poking to allow different integrations and their integrations and their integrations, then we can do better to protect ourselves, protect the data at rest, limit access to specific environments, like data minimization. We don't see anymore. It's like data proliferation across the ecosystem, copy it everywhere. But then that's everywhere the data is exposed. So I think if we harden our internal data security practices, we have really, really robust monitoring. Because come with me on a journey. But we have access monitoring, normal patterns of user behaviors, which is so key. User behavior analytics is so important. We have a risk or a breach. They stole known authentication tokens. So somebody looks legitimate. But if you have access monitoring, you can see what that user baseline is and what maybe looks a little bit different from what their day-to-day is. And you can find that risk and mitigate that risk. But if you don't have user activity monitoring, you don't know if Sally should be pulling SSNs like by the boatload, or is that for job? No clue. It's just like data is data, but you don't know what to do with it. So protecting the data, if they get into it and it's tokenized or it's masked or obfuscated in one way, then there's no risk there. Have my tokens, that's fine. I'll redo it. But if it's just clear text SSNs in every environment, then there's the risk is still our ownness, and I guess, integration is just exacerbate it all.
I like where you took us there. Totally agree. Cloud's getting bigger, and the nth degree supply chain is becoming more and more of a problem. We're seeing it, right? We're seeing these breaches. But where you took us solving it was really back to the basics, which I'm a big fan of. I get on my soapbox quite a bit with folks I'm advising on that. Like, I feel like in the security industry and as technologists, we always want to sprint to that shiny new thing, or we have this problem. There must be an exotic solution of all of these things we got to combine and cobble. Right, we got to over-engineer it, but where he took us was even more basic, right? Firm up our data security, firm up what we're doing here. Maybe a little more advanced. Because you brought up user behavior analytics, right? I think that's something that a lot of folks have tried and maybe failed over the years. So I'm curious. Let's dig into that a little bit. Certainly, understanding normal behaviors super important, right? Watching Sally in HR, what she does today versus next month. If there's a difference, maybe that's a problem. If folks don't have an actual behavior analytics platform, where should they start? What's the best way for them to start to build those baselines, in your opinion?
Yeah, and it sounds so easy, and this is where a lot of secure data security programs have issues because you have to, 1, know where all of your data is, and then 2, you have to know who should and should not be accessing that data everywhere it sits. So there's, like, a lot of observability and contextualization that has to exist within your ecosystem to be able to even just do, like, those 2 initial things. Most people I talk to say, "Where tell me everywhere you have Social Security numbers stored." They don't know. They don't have that visibility into their data estate, so it's kind of an unknown, which is even riskier. So knowing where your data is, understanding who's accessing it, and then adding the monitoring or the observability to establish what those patterns are. And those have to be longer term patterns because I could be Sally in HR. I don't generally do a big report except for month end. So I need enough time to show that duration saying there's no queries, but month end I'll do a big report because that's got to go to the board or that's got to go to some executive or I do internal operations or whatever. So it's justified, but you have to have like longer term data patterns to be able to understand the trends to be able to do the analytics on it to say there's this weird spike, there's this fluctuation, who did it, where did they do it, was it justified? Like, you got to be able to track them down and understand what their workflow is or the process that they're tied to say, yeah, I can actually access its data for XYZ. I mean, I guess you have to establish data ownership. It's like everything, all the data management stuff that people forgot about. Like, you've got to do that too.
Right. It's stuff that's not new that we've kind of ignored for the last 20 years or, pushed down the road, is back, right? It's here and it's being exposed. It's being exposed that we didn't do those proper things for all these years. Or even worse, people thought they were doing the proper things. And survey says, no, you weren't. Um, so knowing where your data is. Yes, absolutely, right? The real estate's getting bigger. Certainly, to your point, once upon a time, it was pretty easy. Back in the day, it was all on-prem. Now the proliferation of, cloud environments, certainly, more complex type of organizations with subsidiaries makes it even worse, right? Understanding what's going on there. Observability is an interesting one, though, because I think observability is a term that has many different definitions depending on what persona you're sitting in when you're either saying or listening to the word. So when you refer to observability with regard to data security, what's your definition?
In data security, that it really is like that's the nuts and bolts of it, as I can see what is going on. I know where data's going to, I know where it came from, I know what environments it exists in across the ecosystem. I know who's accessing it. I know, hopefully, what they're doing with it. That's really cool with like lineage. Where does it go from here? Just being able to see that end-to-end flow, what happens to the data during each fop or use, and then where it goes from there, I think is what I would consider observability in a data security environment. It's very different than like security observability. Obviously, that's like logs and events. It's more complex with the data.
Yeah, and I think it brings up a lot of conversations between even data security leaders. I think back, shoot, even 5 years ago in roles I've had, you kind of have that fight within security on where does observability need to be. And generally speaking, I've seen organizations at least start, hopefully just start, with I need observability at the perimeter, i.e., as data's leaving, right? Data loss prevention, those types of tools. I've often argued that's great. That's a great place to start, maybe, right? Because as data's leaving, you certainly want to see that. You want to try to stop it. But you need observability east-west internally, right? You need that, right? Because you really can't build those patterns you're referring to if you can't see that Sally in HR is reaching into this internal system. Like if you only have the observability that Sally sent it out, you don't have that context. You don't have the data lineage to use the term that you used. Um, how do you suggest folks try to start to get that observability? Because I think that's the difficult part, right? Getting that east-west type of observability.
Outside of people there, it's so funny because this created this holistic native data security. From on-prem, I'm doing scanning, point and find me these 5 data elements, tell me where it is. I point to an environment, etc. There's not broad data estate context, and it really is you have to tune it to those specific elements, and it's very, pattern matching based, which is it's very problem heavy. Where it created with the cloud this niche market for like data security specific tools, like a data security posture management tool, which we see tons of now. I talk to people about it every day with a DSPM solution, and that is kind of unique in that it solved a lot of the problem from end to end. It came in and it provided full context. Generally speaking, most of them provide full context of your data environment, types of data, where that data lives. You can see where, some will go back to like, where did that come from? You can see access, who's accessing what, where they sit in the organization, and you kind of create that holistic profile to then use that to drive your decisions and your insights and your risk management activities, because it just gives you all of the information without having to have a scanning tool, and then without having to have database activity monitoring tool, and then without having to have some kind of access management thing, which that's also complicated if it's not like a centralized tool. So I find that a data security specific tool those are growing up to be so helpful in a lot of those like instances.
Yeah, yeah, finally, right? Like data discovery has been around for a long time. You think back to like the early DLP tools, RSA. It's actually Tabless was RSA originally. Vontu, like they did grid scanning and all that, and it was exactly what you're referring to, right? Looking for patterns. I got to look for an SSM. I got to look for this. It's amazing to see where that technology has come these days, where you no longer have to do a point and shoot. You can kind of do the connect to your environment, do a real discovery of what is my storage estate, and finally what is my data estate within that storage. It's a breath of fresh air, I guess, if you will. Actual real innovation finally happening in the data security arena. Um, Going with observability though, I feel like there has to be a certain amount of conversation that goes with it as well, right? The tools are great at saying, Sally did this thing, but for a data security expert or analyst to actually understand, is that rational that Sally's doing that? Is that normal? You probably need to talk to Sally or at least the leaders of that department. So, do you have any tips or tricks for having those discussions with the various organizations?
Yeah, it really, and this is where we branch into data management. This is always my favorite thing about data security is it is so complex and it's always a it depends answer. Can Sally access that data? It depends. It really depends. Whereas like other security practices, it's a binary answer, yes or no. Can the system access this system? Yes or no. Data, it's does Sally have a business reason? And what's she doing with the data? How long is she going to be doing that with the data? Where is she going to send it? And all of those depend, and it changes day over day. So you have to have a really good data ownership and accountability program set up on the front end to have people say, I'm an expert over this domain. I know who should be doing what with my data and where. And then we can say, hey, did you say Sally could do this with the data? Is it authorized? Does she have a good business case? Are we following, principle of least privilege? Is she only getting the bare minimum data she needs to execute her function? Does she do it once a month? Does she do it every day? Is it for a duration? I'm running this report for the regulators only for 6 months. So if it's 6 months and 5 days later, what is she doing in there? So it's really like sitting down with everybody, not just in security, but you have to understand the data owner's perspective. You have to sit with Sally and understand her process, what she's doing day to day with the information, and then any potential downstream consumers. Because what if Sally sends it to Joe? Joe has a business need. Then Fred said, oh, that's a cool report. I want to do it for something else. Well, now we've exceeded the initial intent of that data use. And maybe Fred doesn't actually need, or he's not allowed to see that data. So we have to understand like the end-to-end flow and create those boundaries and limitations to, I guess, do right by the data.
It depends. Oh my goodness. Like, I don't know how many times in my career I've said that. And um, you said it so well. Data security, it depends. Pretty much everything else in security is binary. Like, I think you summed up what's been my headache for the last 20 years because and I don't know about you. I know you've had a similar background to myself working in large organizations and being in consulting and stuff, but I always got mean looks or raised eyebrows when I'd have conversations with my leaders or my peers, and I'd say, "Well, it depends." And I'd get kind of this like, "Do you not know what you're talking about, Ward? What's going on?" It's like, no, like this is not like antivirus that it's either bad or good. It's not like it's a firewall rule that's, binary. It's either allowed or not allowed. It is very much down to all of those questions, the who, what, where, when, why, how, but also temporal. Is this a one-time thing? Is it an ongoing thing? You mentioned monthly, it could be quarterly, right? Who knows when you're developing a baseline? It might be random. It depends. I love that.
And what we see in the data security space, like security in general can easily sit on the perimeter and not be involved in like the weeds for those conversations. But in data, we have to be close partners with our governance folks, with our business folks, with our security friends, with the technology people, because I want to help find the safe and right way to do something with the person. I don't want to say no. But because it depends, I have to sit with that person and understand what they're doing so we can create the safe, right way to do that thing. If I'm just sitting in like an ivory tower and they're like, can I access data? I'm like, no. Well, the business can't be the business, and that's what I'm actually supposed to enable the business, not tell them no.
Or just say yes, right? And yes might not be the right answer either. I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations like, we want to do this thing. Like, okay, cool. Like that thing doesn't sound bad. Like, give me some more details. And you kind of get those more details and you realize like you're trying to do this thing and you're overcomplicating it because you think you have to. Like, why don't you just do this? Oh, we can do that? Yes. Yes, you can, and you actually win a friend at that point, right? You help them decomplicate their process. Um, love that. It depends. That we'll have to make that the tagline of this episode, I think, because that's what it comes down to each and every time. So, it depends. Give us a little bit more about that. Maybe do you have any good stories around it depends type of, conversation?
I do. So we can go with me when I used to be an engineer. I worked for a large financial institution. I was a data engineer in mortgage, but the settlement department. And I was asked to run a monthly report for the OCC for credit bureau suppression. So you would think credit bureau suppression, it's an indicator, it's an asterisk in one field in a whole table. Well, there's these laws, rules, and regulations that if you're on the phone with a customer, you cannot tell them if we are or are not suppressing credit bureau reporting. The customer can't know that. So the data was super locked down, but I had to have access to run that monthly OCC report to send it out to show like who are we suppressing versus who are we not suppressing for reporting. So that was a very it depends situation. Can anybody see that data? Absolutely not. Can frontline membership see that data to tell the customer? Absolutely not. But I am the one person who had to get 4 approval to see that one field. I got literally that one field on the table to be able to do my reporting for, a regulatory requirement. So that was a very it depends situation that had to be thoroughly vetted before they would give me access to only that field.
Thoroughly vetted and likely a whole, role-based type of access control put into place that you and maybe a handful of other folks actually had access to.
Exactly. And then the minute that reporting was gone, they had to pull the access and, very strict review process to is she still doing this report? So it was a very, eye-opening, wow.
That's a great example of, shoring up. So bringing it back to the supply chain and the nth degree, and that underlines the, super importance of that good hygiene, those good processes on your actual data. Because, yes, in this case, right, you were an employee of that organization, but the same thing would be true if you were a supplier, right, that happened to have access into that environment.
Yep. Yep. So then it's really you gave the initial access, but is it still valid? Do they still need it? Do they still need that level or those specific elements or parameters that they initially were approved for? Was there scope creep? I've been in lots of situations where people are like, here's my data contract request. I want these 5 elements. Okay, cool. Here's those 5 elements. And the next thing you know, I'm like, that data pool has 15 elements. What are we doing? Get back to the contract. We need 5. So it's same thing. You have to constantly re-review it. Just because you approved it doesn't mean that's what's still happening or that it's still a good idea.
Yes, yes. There's been a few examples of that in my career as well, where human nature, people do the least amount of work to get the job done, and there's been a handful of times where I've seen in my DLP tools almost full database extracts sent to an actual third party supplier. I'll bring in the supply chain here, and my tools will catch it, monitor only. I'll say, "What are you doing?" Well, we have to do that. Okay, but your contract says they need these, to your point, 5 things. Why did you send them all of these fields? And then it's an, "Oh, shoot," right? They weren't authorized. That third party wasn't authorized to have all of that data. Broken business process, right? That's what it usually fall into. Let's how do we fix it? Super, super, and it goes back to observability. I think bringing it back to what you had said earlier. So in your role now, right? You've been a lot in the enterprise. Now you're in consulting. Um, how are you navigating some of those conversations around setting up the best practices? Because in the past, you've been able to kind of directly influence a lot of that stuff in your previous roles. Now you're more of an advisor. So how are you bringing in your new role with your previous experience to help out your customers?
Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset that you have to have because I used to just be able to say, this is what you need to do. And then it was that was the end of the conversation, loosely speaking. Now it's well, I think this is what industry is saying, and here's, the specific framework and the guidelines elicit these 5 things that would be a really good idea to do. I think the difference is I do have a lot of that industry experience that I layer into the conversations. It's well, when I was doing this in my past life, here's what I found effective. Here's what I was able to move forward with. Here's what kind of was a gotcha that I had to reevaluate to help better influence with experience. versus just kind of trying to be like authoritative and directive. It's, well, I messed up on this in the past. I don't want you to have to do that. Like, I'm here to help you avoid the pitfalls of my mistakes. So I try to leverage my past experience of being on the other side of the fence to help like create ideas with influence with the customers that I'm talking to day to day.
Showing the battle scars, right? Here's my battle scars. Hey, customer, I'm sure you have some as well. Let's make sure you don't get the same ones that I have. I've done that plenty of times myself.
It's almost like it earns you a little trust too, because they're like, oh, this person has lived it, so they're not just like speaking theory at me, which I find valuable usually.
Right, exactly. Hey, they didn't just read this in a book. They didn't chat GPT it, which a lot of people are doing these days, right? Put it into the good old AI and see what it spits out. They've actually been there. It's not just book knowledge. Completely agree. So you brought up knowing what you have, where it's at, how it's accessed. You brought up observability. Anything else that you might throw into kind of solving for this third party, the nth degree data risk?
Yeah, it's really relying on, I think, educating your third party risk management team to reach further than just your first or second hop, because it is the weakest link in that entire supply chain. You might have your first vendor who's super solid, but then they had this other vendor and that vendor's integration was compromised. But if they can move laterally, then they can already get in. So like the initial security checks weren't necessarily valid. So helping beef up your third-party risk management program and working with them and understanding like what are things to look for and be cognizant of, what questions should we ask, because now that has to be in the questionnaire to go a little bit further and have them attest to or to do your security reviews with. I think that extending out further into the supply chain is one of the other ways that we can just make things a little bit better.
I like that, and I think that goes back to something you said earlier with data security folks. Like we already have to be super entrenched with the business. A lot of my guests have said that, right? Know your business, have your champions, know what HR is doing, whatever. I think this is just another facet of that, right? Make sure you're entrenched with your third party supply chain, third party risk management group, and maybe give them some of those questions to ask, like, hey, ask this thing, ask that thing, figure out who their suppliers are. Make sure you log it even. That way, if there is a breach, you can do some research to see like, hey, so and so had an issue. We don't use them, but do any of our partners use them?
Are we at risk? That's the biggest thing we saw CISOs ask all year. This was breached. Are we at risk? And without knowing, to your point, that's just lineage, but make it system lineage out to your supply chain. Like if you don't know what that looks like, you don't know what to do or how to fix it. And that's like, a big security blind spot. If you can't protect what you don't know, or if you don't know what you have, you can't protect it. So.
Observability. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Very big. Very big. Awesome. All right. Well, I mean, you've clearly been around the block a time or two. You've done this for a handful of years. You just started your new role, but taking it back to your previous role, how did you get into, really kind of a data security leadership type role? What was your journey?
It's so funny. My career trajectory is anything but linear, and I think very different than a lot of people who end up in data security. Outside of like my first job was like IT. I did desktop support for a phone bank, so right, like ran cables. I could rebuild a PC. I got into data engineering, so I started as a data engineer. I grew up as, and that's I think why I know data. So it is why I know data so well, because I grew up in the trenches with data. And then in parallel, I was also getting my doctorate in information assurance and security. So it kind of layered on my data experience with a lot of the security stuff that I was able to do. But then I didn't go right into data security at all. I moved into a data management role after I did data analytics. I moved into data management role. and help stand up some, data quality and information management practices, like collect your metadata, do data quality basic stuff. And then from there, I helped partner on bringing in a tokenization tool because I was going for the doctorate and, my research is in data security. So they brought me on the project. And when that team was stood up to protect sensitive data on the business side, I got pulled over to help them. So I also I helped our team create a data security program from the ground up for a big organization. We started with finding all the data. We had to do a big remediation project, which is super fun because we had to sit there with those people and say, I found this data. Do you need it? But what are you doing with it? Should it be there? Can you not do that with it and still execute and run as a business? And then if not, here's what we can do to further protect the data. And then moved into data architecture. So took another curveball, helped solve data architecture for a lot of teams. And then I still partnered really well with security because I had that experience, I had the knowledge. I helped the data architects do data security better because, it's not, data people don't know security, they usually don't care. And a lot of times you'll find security people don't know data, they don't care. They sometimes get stuck with data. That's a security domain they have to cover. There became an opportunity where I could take over data security architecture, which is when I first got exposed to DSPM because I've got this big problem I've got to solve. What is the industry doing out there? Did, some Google doctor research, thought DSPM was this new cool thing. I love this. I'm so about it. I'm a big champion. I think that was 22 or 23. So it was very early in the DSPM journey. Then another pivot in data architecture responsible for data protection. So kind of same thing. And then that led me into, now I'm a consultant for data risk management. So
And now you went to what some people call the dark side. Actually, no, sorry. Vendor work is the dark side. You're still good in the consulting realm.
I'm an intermediary. I'm gray.
Yeah. Almost the gateway, right, to eventually going to the vendor arena, perhaps. Very cool. Very cool. So we're right now, you and I, we're in 2025, but when this episode airs, when the audience is listening right now, it'll be 2026. So I'd like to ask, starting out the year, do you have any big data security predictions for 2026?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see more, AI was a big thing. I think the biggest thing is we're going to see more budget allocated to data security. And because of the need, the desire to adopt AI and agentic AI, and you name it, whatever comes next year for the fast evolution, it really exposed the problem that people ignored their data for so long. I'll do data security later. I'll worry about data management later. Well, now's the time they have to worry about it. And data security was usually a last line item on the budget. I think we're going to see a shift where people are going to start paying for it and focusing on it and kind of making security on the data a little bit more robust than a lot of the organizations. And then I see agentic AI is last year, if you would have asked me, I would have been yeah, AI. And then now it's agentic AI because if you're automating tasks and assigning authorization to something else, and then that something else is talking to something else, and there's full human abstraction from it. I think that is going to create another very interesting shift in data privacy and data security because it's very hands-off from the person on the keyboard perspective. So I think that one is something that I'm actively trying to figure out what we need to do there.
Very cool. And I think that's a great prediction. And yeah, I kind of hate, but I kind of love that AI was part of the answer, right? Because it's been the answer. It's been, hey, this thing's going to happen with AI for probably the last 3 or 4 years, right? I mean, I think about the major conferences, the RSAs, the Black Hats, you can't talk to anybody out there without hearing AI as part of the answer. And it's only getting better / worse as we go along, more complicated. So yeah, I think that is probably true. I think that's probably going to happen here in 2026. I think for yourself and even Trace 3, I think what that's going to necessitate is a lot more consulting. There's going to be a lot of organizations that simply can't staff an army or don't want to be able to figure out, what is their data risk assessment, what does their data look like, and help them stand up some of these data security programs. So,
Yeah, we've already seen an influx. A lot of people want to do like safe Copilot adoption. What's the what's the precursor to that? Do I know where the data is that Copilot can access? Is it properly locked down? So we're already engaged in a lot of situations where somebody wants to do AI, but they're forgot about the data security stuff. So we're coming in to really help solve that problem. And I definitely think that it's going to increase like our backlog of work as more and more AI things come to play, and it exposes more holes within like overall data security.
yeah, yeah. And, the other thing that I'm kind of seeing along those lines is there's a lot of folks now, at the end of the year, right? Again, we're still in 2025, but probably, definitely the beginning of the year of 2026, there's folks that don't have a lot of budget, but they're throwing a little bit at it to at least start doing something, right? Understand, hey, I think I've got sensitive data in this environment. Let's get a feel for what that looks like and bite off that chunk first instead of boiling the ocean right off the bat. At least they're doing something.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what is your immediate need? What's the immediate hole we can fill in your boat? And can we get you to the shore? And then after we're on the shore, let me help you build a big boat or build a big boat. Like, that's fine. But it might just be, let's baby step through this. Do you have policy in place? Like, do people even have a classification policy? Do people have an access management policy? Like, those are precursors to feed the rest of the data security stuff we're doing. So it really is sitting down and understanding, where are you right now? Let me meet you where you are right now. What's the immediate thing you need to do to be okay? And then let's also do something really cool so you're resilient.
Absolutely. Well, Jen, if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
LinkedIn, probably, because that's like where you go to talk to everybody, I think, in the business world.
That is absolutely true, and we'll make sure to have a link to it on the recording. I also understand, if memory serves, you've got a podcast as well, right?
Oh, yeah. It's, yes, I do have a podcast. It is very unprofessional and unserious. We talk about scary movies,
Ah,
but it's really fun. Uh, so that's all we care about. I don't do editing or anything like formal. We'll record a podcast. It's chaotic, and then we'll just upload it, and I don't think about it again until the next time we do one. But it's fun because I love scary movies, and my really good friend hates them. And I make her watch all these scary movies that we find on Reddit, on Shudder, on the internet, on anything, literally anything. And we just talk about what we think about them. So it's really fun. If you can't judge me because we do drop some swear words, but if you're okay with that, Frightmare on B Street is the podcast name.
Frightmare on B Street. There you go. So for all the listener like myself that are horror fans, go out and give it a listen for sure. For sure.
We'll always spoil it, so beware. But yeah, it'll be fun if you want to know what you should or shouldn't watch.
So make sure to watch it first, right? Watch the movie and then listen to the podcast episode that goes with it. I like that. And also you do some powerlifting too, correct?
I do, yeah. Olympic weightlifting. So we do like just snatch and clean and jerk, the more classic lifts. But yeah, I do that. I was, apparently when planning out my life, I was like, what's a really stressful, expensive hobby I could do to take my mind off work? And apparently that's weightlifting. So yeah, it's really fun. But I don't know if it's chill by any means.
Well, Jen, thank you for joining the episode today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being able to, talk about my favorite subject.
Of course. And a big thank you to the audience. Really hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte scale data protection without the fuss, please visit Centra.io. Catch you next time.